Michael lay quietly in the dimly lit hospital room, the soft hum of the oxygen machine breaking the silence. The night outside was heavy, the kind of night where the air seemed to hold its breath. Nurse Melody had seen many patients in her years of work, but something about Michael's eyes that evening made her pause. They carried a story not just of illness, but of a man wrestling with something far deeper. And though the ward was calm, she could feel it in her bones. Before the night ended, a truth would surface that neither of them could ignore. Melody was no stranger to the quiet weight that lingered in hospital wards at night. She had worked through countless shifts, tending to the sick, comforting the lonely, and sometimes holding the hands of those who would not see another sunrise. But Michael was different. From the first day he was admitted, he spoke little, yet his silence was not empty. It was heavy, deliberate, like a man carrying words too sharp to let out. His condition was serious, yet he never complained. He would sit by the window when he could, staring into the distance as if searching for something far beyond the walls of that hospital. Melody had learned to read people. In the ward, the body might be weak, but it was the eyes that told the real story. And Michael's eyes, they seemed to carry both resignation and a flicker of hope. She didn't know why, but she felt drawn to that quiet mystery. On this particular evening, as the day shift handed over to the night, Melody found herself thinking about him more than usual. She didn't know that before the night was over, Michael would reveal something that would stay with her for the rest of her life. The ward was quiet that night, the kind of quiet that could make every little sound feel louder. The ticking of the wall clock seemed almost deliberate, each second passing like a reminder that time was moving, for everyone. Melody moved from bed to bed, checking on her patients. She adjusted pillows, changed IV bags, whispered soft words to those who were restless. But when she reached Michael's bed, she noticed something different. He wasn't lying down. Instead, he was sitting up, leaning slightly forward, his hands clasped together like a man deep in thought. The warm glow from the bedside lamp cast shadows across his face, making his eyes look darker, more intense. "Are you feeling okay?" she asked softly. Michael didn't answer right away. His gaze was fixed on his hands, as if searching for the right words. When he finally looked up, there was a faint smile on his lips, the kind of smile people give when they want to reassure you, even though something inside them is breaking. "I'm fine, Melody," he said at last. "I was just thinking." Melody pulled a chair closer and sat beside him. She knew that just thinking in a hospital could mean 100 different things. Sometimes it meant fear, sometimes it meant regret, and sometimes it meant a decision had already been made. Outside, the sound of distant footsteps echoed faintly in the corridor. A night nurse pushing a trolley passed by, the wheels squeaking slightly before fading away. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm tea from the staff room down the hall. Michael shifted in his seat, the hospital gown rustling. "You've been kind to me," he said quietly. "Not just because it's your job, but because you care." Melody felt a lump form in her throat. She didn't know what to say, so she simply nodded. Sometimes silence carried more weight than words. He took a slow breath and let it out. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you. It's unusual, maybe even strange, but it's important to me." Melody leaned forward slightly, her eyes searching his face. "Go on," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. And in that moment, she knew whatever Michael was about to say was not just a request. It was a piece of his soul, something he needed to share before his time ran out. Melody shifted in her chair, her heart beating a little faster. She had heard many requests from patients over the years, some small, some impossible. But there was something in Michael's eyes that told her this one would be different. He paused for a long moment before speaking, as though measuring each word. Before I go," he began, his voice low and steady. "There's something I wish I could do one last time." Melody stayed quiet, giving him the space to continue. Michael looked past her, toward the small window where the curtains swayed slightly from a night breeze. "I want to see the sunset again. Not from this bed, not through that small window. I want to feel the wind, smell the trees, hear the laughter of people outside. I want to be outside, just once more." Melody's chest tightened. She knew his condition. Walking even a short distance would exhaust him. The doctors would not approve. The risk was too high. But looking at him now, she understood this wasn't about defying medical orders. It was about a man wanting to hold on to a piece of life before it slipped away. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. She thought about the rules, the consequences. And then she thought about her grandmother, who always told her, "Sometimes, child, kindness is greater than caution." Michael's voice broke her thoughts. "I know it might not be possible," he said softly, "but I needed to ask." Melody met his gaze, and in that instant, a silent agreement passed between them. She wouldn't promise him yet, but deep down, she knew she couldn't let him leave this world without that one last wish. She stood up, glancing toward the corridor to make sure no one was near. "Rest for now," she told him gently. "Let me think about it." Michael gave a small nod, his eyes glistening with a mixture of hope and acceptance. "Thank you, Melody, even for just listening." As she walked away, her mind was already turning. She knew the risks. She knew the rules. But in the stillness of that night, one truth rang louder than all the rest sometimes: the heart must take the lead. The rest of the night passed in a strange kind of silence. Melody went about her duties, but her mind kept drifting back to Michael's words. One last sunset. It sounded so simple, yet in a hospital setting, it felt like asking for the moon. Each time she passed his bed, she found him awake, his eyes calm but watchful, as if quietly waiting for her decision. By the time her shift was halfway through, Melody had already begun thinking of a plan. The hospital gates closed to visitors at night, but the courtyard, a small garden between the wards, was open, though rarely used at night. It wasn't far from Michael's room. If she timed everything right, they could get there without drawing too much attention. But doubts tugged at her. What if he collapsed? What if the doctor found out? What if she made things worse? Yet another voice inside her whispered, what if this is the last good memory he'll ever have? Around midnight, the ward was at its quietest. The other nurses were either making rounds in the far rooms or busy with paperwork. Melody quietly approached Michael's bed. He looked up at her, and without words, she knew he was asking the question, "Have you decided?" She took a deep breath. "Michael," she said softly, "if we're going to do this, it has to be now." His lips curved into the smallest smile, and for the first time since she'd met him, there was a spark not just in his eyes, but in his whole face. She found a wheelchair in the corner and began adjusting the blankets, so he would be warm. Michael didn't say much, just followed her movements with quiet anticipation. His hands trembled slightly as she helped him into the chair, but he held on. As they moved down the corridor, Melody's heart pounded. Each creak of the wheelchair felt like a drumbeat in the silent hospital. They passed the nurse's station without a sound, the soft hum of the vending machine masking their footsteps. Finally, they reached the glass doors that opened into the courtyard. Melody pushed them open, and the cool night air rushed in. Michael closed his eyes and inhaled deeply, as though that breath alone was worth the entire journey. The courtyard lay still under the moonlight, the air cool and carrying the faint scent of wet earth. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called softly, and the leaves of the tall acacia tree rustled like they were whispering secrets to the wind. Melody wheeled Michael to the center of the garden, where the stone benches curved around a small flower bed. Above them, the stars were scattered like tiny fires across the black sky. She stopped the wheelchair and stood beside him, watching his face. Michael's eyes moved slowly, taking in every detail: the glimmer of dew on the grass, the soft glow of the hospital lights behind them, the swaying branches reaching up toward the sky. "This," he whispered, "this is what I wanted." Melody smiled faintly. "It's not a sunset, but..." He shook his head gently. "It's better. The night is alive, and it's quiet enough to hear my own thoughts." "How?" They stayed there in silence for a while. Melody could hear his breathing slow, deliberate, like he was trying to match it to the rhythm of the wind. Every now and then, he would close his eyes and just listen. Finally, he spoke again, his voice trembling. "You know, when you're sick for so long, the world starts to feel like it's passing you by. People talk about their plans, their families, their dreams, and you just watch from a window. Tonight, I feel like I'm part of it again." Melody felt the sting of tears in her eyes, but kept her gaze fixed on the stars. She didn't want him to see her cry. After a while, Michael reached for her hand. His grip was weak but steady. "Thank you," he said, his voice full of something deeper than gratitude. "If this is my last night, I'm okay with that." The words hung in the air, heavy yet peaceful. Melody squeezed his hand, her throat too tight to speak. When it was finally time to go back inside, she wheeled him toward the ward slowly, letting the night wrap around them one last time. The The sound of the door clicking shut behind them felt like closing the final page of a beautiful but brief chapter. Back in his bed, Michael looked more at ease than she had ever seen him. As she adjusted his blanket, he smiled. Not the tired, polite smile from before, but something softer, the smile of a man who had made peace with the world. And in that quiet, Melody knew she would never forget that night.